Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to I like want to continue in even more of my series, and my standalones are just like, remember me? Definitely is like the baby of the family. But I went out on a limb. I'm so excited again that I did this challenge, who has turned it all into a bit of a game of truth and dare, or truth or dare. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today's video is going to be a wrap up of how my series September went. And you guys, it went great. So I did not expect to get as into it as I did, and it's been a really long time since I've done a readathon, and I have to say, I think I am well suited for the month-longs, because the weekly ones, I feel like it's a ton of pressure, but I was able to do mostly series. I read a few standalones this month, which I'm going to talk about in another video so it doesn't get like too crazy long, but I wound up reading something new back into old series that I had dropped and haven't picked up again, and a new release which I didn't quite finish, but I will talk about it a little bit at the end. So, or actually it's not even a new release, it's a not yet released. I got an arc, but anyway, we'll talk about that one at the end. But I want to talk about all the books that I read in a series in September. So if you saw my video about series September, then you know Krista from Books and Jams and Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand hosted this month-long readathon. And not to embarrass myself, but we're all friends here, there was a scorecard and I made notes on it. I'm so old school, I can't even. But I will tell you about what I read and what prompts it filled. But I wound up doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 9 squares. And I am 30% done with another square, but I'm not going to count it. So we'll talk about that one. But let's dive into it with revisiting an old favorite of 2020 and going out on a limb and saying I think I found what's going to be one of my favorites of 2021, and it's The Inheritance Games and The Hawthorne Legacy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So Hawthorne Legacy just came out in September, so I was totally itching for this one. I pre-ordered it, it arrived day of, and you bet your bottom dollar, I went right into it. So I read The Inheritance Games last year, and I totally loved it, I totally devoured it. This is a YA mystery, and it is kind of, it was like pitched as kind of like a Knives Out sort of a situation where you have this entire family who is left out of this bazillionaire's fortune, and the money gets left to this seemingly completely random girl, and the whole family wants to know why. They're totally jealous, and basically they want the money. So it's sort of like that same-ish Knives Out kind of a vibe to it, except in this case our main character has no idea why she was chosen as the one to get the inheritance. So this is about a girl named Avery Grams, and she's a junior in high school, and she lives with her sister. They share a father who basically abandoned them when they were younger, and Avery's mom has passed away. So it's just the two of them together, and they're basically trying to like make ends meet. And Avery winds up getting a visit from this attorney who comes to tell her, you are in the will of Tobias Hawthorne, and she has no idea who that is. But he winds up leaving her, I always check, $46.2 billion. So he lives down in Texas. Avery and her sister go down there, and there's some rules, like she has to live in the house for a year, and his entire family, his daughters and grandsons, who have been disinherited, will also continue to live at the estate. And basically, Avery finds herself trying to solve the mystery of why she's the one who was chosen, and also trying to stay alive. So I totally loved this, fell in love with the characters. I wound up reading this / listening to this on audio. And I'm so glad I did, because as much as I remembered parts of the story, I was totally back in the zone. The audiobook is tremendous. So I read it the first time, audioed it this time, and then went straight into the sequel, which I'm not going to tell you much about because I don't want to spoil anything from book 1, but suffice to say, it was so good. I absolutely loved this book. I love Jennifer Lynn Barnes' writing. I love these characters. I love the story, and I just can't recommend it enough. I actually am just like low-key obsessed, and this is one of those books where I've talked about this with a few books, The minute I stopped, like I closed it and finished reading it, I already like, I want to go back again, because I for sure picked up more the second time around with this one, and I just love them. So I think they're great. If you have not dove into this series yet, I recommend them big time. So there was only one little thing that bugged me about these books, and it's like so minor, but at the same time, it just like niggled at me the entire time. And I don't think I picked up on it as much originally, but when I was listening to the audiobook, so Avery's best friend Max doesn't curse, which is totally fine. And there's not a lot of swearing in these books, but rather than curse, she'll say other words instead, like I don't give a shit, or like what the fox. And it's supposed to kind of be, I guess, clever or something, but I started to find it so super annoying. And then when I dove into this book, I was so hyper focused on it, so I actually found it to be a distraction. And I think it just would have been easier if she was more like, what the heck? Or like I don't flipping care. Like I feel like if she just used normal words, because it just served as like such a weird distraction for me, and I thought it was unnecessary. But anyway, I guess maybe it was supposed to be kind of cutesy, but I did not find it to be so. But not a reason to not pick these up, because they are, put them in the wrong way, tremendous. So those books filled the prompts of reading 2 books in the same series and reading your newest purchase. That's part of a series. So then I read The Butterfly Garden by Dot Hutchison, and this was my starting a series. I had no idea sort of how dark and messed up this book was going to be, and I, surprising no one, I totally loved it, but this was like definitely like all dark, no stars kind of a situation. And I thought it was so well done in the telling of it and in the story and the characters. And I went into it low-key blind, and I don't even know if I knew more about it going in if it would have made a difference. But I heard about this book from Abby at Crime by the Book. And then when I talked about it in, I want to say like a book haul or my series September, a whole bunch of you guys actually said to me, hey, that's part of a series, which is why I picked it up immediately. So this is a book about a man named the Gardener, and he kidnaps girls and brings them to his garden, and he keeps them for his pleasure. And he's been doing it for a long time. So when this book opens, the garden has been discovered, and 2 FBI agents are interviewing one of the girls who was a survivor from the garden. And we are getting to see what happened sort of building up to the present day of how the FBI discovered the garden and what life was like in the garden and before the garden for our main character. And she's not exactly reliable. She's not quite who she said she is. And it is just such a twisted, dark story of the FBI trying to investigate this, and then this woman's experience as she goes from being a waitress in a restaurant in New York to wind up being kidnapped and captured and held in this completely dark and twisted and messed up garden. And originally, before I read it, it sounded very Kiss the Girls vibes, and I definitely got those vibes, but this was way darker. And I mean, it always feels weird to be like, I loved it, but I loved it. And I really enjoyed these characters. I loved the FBI agent, and the series actually follows the agents. So I'm very curious to see. I didn't buy more in the series, but I'm going to. But I really liked how the story was structured and how it unfolded. There were so many moments that I was so uncomfortable, and that it was like if you were watching a movie, I would have like hidden my eyes, and I definitely had to like step away from the book more than with some other books. But I very much enjoyed it, but it's definitely on the dark and messed up side. So if that is appealing to you, I would totally pick it up, because I do think it's really well written and it's really well done. And again, very interesting characters, very well developed. I really enjoyed the story, and I just highly recommend it. So thank you guys for telling me it was a series, because it definitely got me to pick it up sooner than I would have, and I loved it. Next up is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, and this is actually the second book in a series, which I didn't realize, so it fulfilled that prompt. And I feel like maybe this won't surprise anybody here. I've never read Peter Pan. I probably saw the cartoon when I was a kid, but I don't remember it. I've never seen any of the live action movies. I know, or knew, very little about the story. So The Boy Who Never Grew Up, like I'd seen the Sandy Duncan, I'm Flying from Broadway. I didn't like see it on Broadway, but like I know that song. And, you know, I know it's Wendy and her brothers, and it's in Taylor Swift songs, and Peter Pan syndrome, and sort of these references, and Captain Hook is horrible, and there's like a crocodile, and Tink. But I didn't really know the whole story. And this audiobook was so good. This story was so good. It's so heartbreaking. Like, there's so much I didn't know about this. I didn't know this story at all, you guys. Like, I thought I kind of had a sense of it. I did not expect to be so emotionally moved. And full disclosure, September was a really rough month. Like, you guys know the stuff with my car, and it just was sort of like hit after hit. And this entire month has felt like death by a thousand cuts. And maybe that's what made me cry. Although, in all fairness, a few of these books made me cry in like a real sentimental, something connected kind of a way. And I just loved this story. So all I want to do now, of course, is like watch the movies, and I want to watch like Finding Neverland with Johnny Depp and Kate Winslet, and I'm so super curious about all of the stories and everything, and like the movies that were made about it. But I went a little bit down a rabbit hole doing some research, but I just love this. Like, what a classic. I totally understand why it is a classic. I understand why people love it. It totally just hit a chord with me. And I can't even tell you why I decided to get it from the library. I was just scrolling looking for something to listen to. And again, I didn't even realize it was part of a series. And I thought it was great. So if anyone else is out there like me and you haven't listened to this or read it, highly recommend, because it was great. The next book I have fills the prompt of reading a book in a duology. So I know a third book is coming out in 2023, but for all intents and purposes, where we are right now, it's a duology. So I read One of Us Is Next by Karen McManus, and this is the sequel to One of Us Is Lying. So you have characters from the first book lightly sprinkled into this one, but it's the younger sister of the main character, Bronwyn, from the first book, who's the lead character in the second book. And I wound up listening to this on audio and reading it just a smidge, but I was looking for a good audiobook to be able to listen to sort of counteract this when I was reading it. And it definitely did the trick. This is definitely on the lighter side. This is YA mystery. And in this story, we are, I think, like 8 or 9 months after One of Us Is Lying. And we have sort of a new threat at the high school. So in the first book, we had this online website that was letting out everybody's secrets. And in this book, we have a new player who wants to engage people in a little bit of truth or dare. And kind of hiding behind anonymous text messages, will call out a specific student and ask them truth or dare. And they have, I think, 48 hours to make a decision. And if they don't pick, a truth comes out. If they are given a dare and they don't do it, the truth comes out. And if anyone is stupid enough to pick truth, the truth comes out. And it is basically these epic truths about these characters that just implodes their lives. And I found it entertaining. I found it a little bit predictable. This is one of those books, and there's actually another book I'm going to talk about in my non-series wrap-up, that when I talk about YA books, I feel like there's ranges of YA, where there's ones that are certainly targeted towards a younger audience, and then there are ones that are targeted at sort of both kind of a mature young audience and an adult audience can also have equal enjoyment from it. And to me, this read young. And it's been a long time since I was in high school, but I enjoyed it for, it was light, it was easy. I figured, like I said, I think I already said, I figured out some of the things that were going on in it, and like, it was just fine. It is a book that I'm going to unhaul so somebody else can enjoy it completely. I felt very similar about One of Us Is Lying, and that book to me, which was pitched as The Breakfast Club with Murder, where I thought there was going to be like most of the book in detention and like an isolated mystery, when in actuality, chapter 1, they were in detention. At the end of chapter 1, detention is over. So I did wind up picking this book up from a book event that I did last year online for Y'all West, and this is from Blue Bicycle Books, and I wanted to support an indie bookstore, and I wanted to support an author, and I very much enjoy Karen McManus. Like, I loved Two Can Keep a Secret, I loved The Cousins, I definitely have my eye on her new book, but for some reason this series just doesn't resonate the same way with me, and for some reason this reads younger to me. So it's not a bad book by any means. I think it's totally fine. The audiobook was really well done. You have multiple characters, you get 3 different points of view in this. So definitely light, fun, easy read. I would say kind of middle of the road 3-star book for me. So I'm glad I wrapped up the series. I'm glad I read a book that was actually on my shelf and it fulfilled a prompt. So I'm glad I had a reason / motivation to read it. And then the last book I finished this month is No Mercy by Joanna Schaffenhausen. And this is the second book in the Ellery Hathaway series. And I loved this. So I read The Vanishing Season last year, and this was my read a book in a series that you started more than a year ago book. And I totally loved that book. And it is about a woman named Ellery. And as a child, she was kidnapped by a serial killer and she is rescued by an FBI agent. So she is like the sole survivor, and they wind up catching the serial killer when she's a teenager. And we meet her in present day in book 1, and some stuff happens. And she winds up reaching out to that FBI agent, Reed, who helped her, rescued her when she was a teenager. And they partner together in the first book to solve a mystery. And Ellery is back in book number 2. It is about kind of like One of Us Is Next. It's, I think, like 8 or 9 months later. And she's now living in Boston, and she gets involved in another mystery. I don't want to say anything because I don't want to give anything away from book number 1. But this series follows Ellery and Reed. He is, I said, an FBI agent, and I just really love this writing. I love these characters. These are not huge books, but there's so much story packed into it, and it feels like a book that's longer than it is. This is like just over 300 pages. So for the prompt to finish it series, I listened to the 3rd book in the Brown Sisters series, and it's Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. I loved this, you guys. So I read Chloe and I read Danny, both of them last year, I want to say. And then, yeah, totally read them last year. And I am so torn. I want to say Eve Brown is my favorite of the 3, but Zaph from Danny Brown is still, I think, my favorite love interest. I really like Jacob in this book, but Zaph still, I think he still kind of takes the cake for me there. But I really, really, really loved this book. It was such great fun. It's completely in the same vein as the other 2 books. So in this book, we follow Eve, who is the youngest of the 3 sisters, and she's sort of the certified hot mess. She's the flighty one, she's the baby, she's not used to having to work as hard, she has gotten very comfortable, and her parents are kind of like, you need to get a job, we can't just keep supporting you this way, like you need to understand some responsibility, you need to take some ownership, and she is just not excited about it. And I mean, it's hard when you're the baby in the family, because it's definitely different, but she kind of, in this sort of stubborn snit, is like, fine, whatever, I'm leaving. Kind of packs up some of her stuff, drives away, and then, as fate would have it, she winds up at this B&B, and they are looking for someone to hire, and she's done some cooking and stuff on the side, and they need a chef, and they need someone to help them. And the interview doesn't go great, because the owner of the B&B, this guy Jacob, is like super type A, super structured, and he is not buying into Eve and her flightiness. And he's sort of like, thanks, but no thanks. And when she's leaving, he's walking out, and she kind of accidentally sort of hits him with her car and kind of breaks his arm. And he finds himself in a situation where he desperately needs help, and Eve winds up being the one to help him. So it's sort of this very unfortunate meet cute that they have. But she winds up working at the B&B. He kind of slowly starts to fall for her. And it's so good. Like, I love them together. And there's just something about her. And like, she's always listening to music, which I love. And there's a playlist at the beginning of the book. And their rapport with each other and just their banter with each other. And something about their connection to me is just my favorite of the 3 stories. And I just loved it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is, as expected, nice and smutty in a few parts. And it is definitely one of those, as someone who was listening to the audiobook, like earphones in, my friends. Not the kind of book you necessarily want to have people hearing at certain points. But it was nice and steamy at certain parts, and I just got like choked up with it. And I love that Danny and Chloe make cameos in this, and they've each had cameos in each other's books. But I thoroughly enjoyed this entire series. Audiobook is tremendous, and I just loved it. I highly recommend it. It was another great, I don't even want to call it a palate cleanser, because it wasn't even that I needed a palate cleanser, but it was like a good balance to some of the darkness that I was reading this month. And it has been on my list this entire year, and it took me just entirely too long to do it. But I'm so glad I did. I loved it. So well done. And it's page turning and it's compulsive, and these are flawed characters, and I just love it. You know, I am a sucker for anything set in Boston, and I just completely devoured it. I have books 3 and 4. Book 5 comes out early in 2022. So when I said earlier in the video, like reading these series has made me want to keep on going, I definitely am going to read a standalone, but then come back. I just love these books. It is just, she's so amazing. She's such a good writer, and I don't hear enough people talking about these books. So I'm so excited I decided to read more from the series, and I always hate to say like I forgot how good they are, but I forgot how much I loved Ellery. She's just such a great character, and so is Reed. I just love them. So highly recommend the series. Vanishing Season is book number 1. You will not be sorry picking up these books. And then the arc that I'm reading right now died. Like, you guys, I am not a big booktuber. I am not big on NetGalley. Like, I don't ask for a lot of books, and when I do, I usually don't get the books that I ask for because I tend to shoot super high. But I still ask for books that I want to read, and I got the email that I was approved for Finley Donovan, Knocks 'Em Dead, book number 2 in the Finley Donovan series, you guys, and I am so freaking excited. So this is by Elle Cosimano. I read Finley Donovan is Killing It earlier this year, and I loved it. I'm about 30% into book number 2, and I'm loving it. I love Finley as a character. I love her nanny slash accountant slash bestie, Vero. This is total Dead to Me vibes, and she's into another mess of a situation. So it's about a month after the first book. We pick back up with her and her friends and her life and her complications. And again, not going to spoil anything from book number 1. So all I'm going to say is Finley is back, and she is just as great as I remember her. So I am so excited. So I'm going to continue to read this book. I will let you guys know full feelings when I'm done with it. I want to say it comes out in February. I know I'm reading it early. I fully intended to like be able to finish it in time, but you know, life. But I couldn't wait to read this book. So I will keep you guys posted on that, but that's what I'm reading right now. So there you have it. I read a whole bunch of series books, and I know I did not read a lot of books that were on my list, but you know, it was always like an overshot kind of a thing. But I forgot, again, like how much I love being able to see characters through and through and through. And like every once in a while there's a standalone book and you're like, oh, I want to be with these characters again. And it's like watching a TV show. Like, it's just like, I want more. And I love the beauty of discovering a series late, because there's more books already out there that I can keep reading. You guys. So I will keep you posted on how I keep doing on reading more from these series. But let me know if you guys did Series September, read any of these, randomly just read any series books this month, series you would recommend, all those things. And I will talk to you guys down below, and I will see you guys in another video. So thanks everybody, take care, bye.